Hello everybody, welcome. I appreciate all of you who listen to my recordings, and it would help me a lot if you subscribe or like them or make a comment or ask a question. My engagement is embarrassingly minute. So to reach more people, whatever help you care to lend would be greatly appreciated. But I'm glad you're just here and that I'm here. We're both still alive. Apparently we're breathing. I'm crossing urban streets on foot, which is vastly more dangerous than we like to think. It turns out that although there are many explanations for the complexity of our human brains, I strongly suspect many of them are either completely wrong or put the precedence on the wrong thing. Obviously, social cognition is one of them, and it would be amazing if we developed complex brains to handle social cognition, only to discover that that would cause us to simulate. This is one of the explanations for human brain complexity. That would cause us to simulate an other, which would become the self, a fiction, right? Because similar to one of my fingers deciding that it is real and the rest of the hand is well, whatever that is, we would become catastrophically misguided thereafter, continue to produce simulations, as well as representational culture, right, where we, with each thing we lose direct participation and relation with, we form a token, and then thereafter relate with the token instead of resurrecting the relationship and the participation. And so we end up in an endless thirst trap where the more representations we make, the more we are suffocating for participation and meaningful roles in relationships. And this leads to a descending nightmare of self-amplifying, what is the word? Poverty, right? Impoverishment. And this seems to match up pretty damn good with what I see going on. But the social cognition argument is powerful. The problem is it leads to an endless cascade of disasters as we stop relating with and in pod groups in which our identity and purposive motivations are useful, celebrated, effective, alive, vital, creative, playful, joyful, fulfilling, rewarding. You know, get together with a team of 3 people and do anything meaningful, right? The rewards at the end of the day are off the scale compared to any possible representation you could form. Yes. This is all the change I have. The large coin is $1.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. That poor old woman, my goodness. She must be 70 and she's living on the street. Oh, God. you see what ends up happening, right? Like, without meaningful cohorts that are real, our elderly end up dying alone in boxes, or worse still, on the street. And what do I mean by our elderly? Okay, I get the problem with the language. I do. We could just say the elderly, which we will all become. So that's us in the future. Okay, what else? Where am I here? Social cognition, meaningful groups, pods. So, in our situation, what's the antidote here? So the first is to teach each other to understand the representational gambit's foundations, right? Which involve the simulation of a separate self, and then the enaction of a separable self that becomes an isolated self. Ask yourself this question. I'll ask myself the same question. How many times per month do I directly physically engage, meet space, with other humans for meaningful purposes that I trust and are beautiful and noble? So first of all, how often do I engage with meet space others for anything? Myself, with a couple of trenchant exceptions, one being somebody I live with. The number of times per month that happens for me is 0. And that's part of why I make these videos, because this is a way for me to participate, to work my vocabulary, which is important because my vocabulary is one of my as a writer and someone who values articulate, intelligent speech, my vocabulary is crucially important. I've worked hard to develop it over my life, although it was natural for me to do that because of my interests. And also to create a context where I'm doing something meaningful in the day, to me, that may provide benefit for distant others, some of whom I know, some of whom I love, many of whom are unknown to me. They're just sort of people who manage to find my channel. But this is not particularly crucially important to my point. I'm merely trying to say that, ask yourself the question, how often, over some interval, say 90 days, are you able to get together with other humans and enact your humanity intelligently, creatively, meaningfully for a purpose you believe in? And even if today, in our time, right, circa 2024, that's a virtual get-together, let's count those. We'll open the aperture from meet space only to virtual context. But you can see the radical difference, right? Suppose that I'm just going to pick something incredibly trivial. 3 neighbors, once a month, get together, wander around their neighborhood together, and pick up trash. Not particularly heroic, but powerful, because they're doing something they believe in, and they will communicate and act as a single member, right? Act like a hand. In fact, they'll literally be picking things up. It's very hand-like. And of course, it turns out that the hand is one of the best metaphors for human togetherness and unity that you can possibly come up with. It might be the best because there's nothing. It's a part of your physical body, right? So, hello.
Great, thanks.
It was developed by evolution. So the model is not a human intellectual model. It's an evolutionary model. It's older than old. It's a really good model for the actual nature of human existence, being, interiority. Now notice that the first thing that happens when you destroy human social groups is that you get individual fingers attempting to do things to enact their humanity in ways that require a hand. I'd love to see anyone attempt to use any of our tools, though they might succeed with a few. Try and use pliers with a single finger. I mean, try to do anything with a single finger. You might be able to sort of play some kind of musical instrument, as long as it didn't require your breath. You could plunk your way along something with a single finger, presuming that you had a hand that the finger was on the end of. The way that our systems work, it's as if they amputate the fingers and then scream at them for not being able to do all the things that a hand could do. So obviously what I'm trying to say here is that the embodiment and fulfillment of our potentials as human beings naturally requires communion, potting up. You will see very few intelligent animals, there are exceptions, that don't pot up. One exception would be octopuses. The other polarity are the organisms that form supergroups. These would be creatures that form hives. Ants, bees, wasps, certain species of spider form massive web communities. Unclear. It may be that the fundamental problem with our species is just that we form misguided supergroups. So what was I thinking originally here? Oh, yes. Huh. All right. So I've actually covered much more ground than I was imagining when I began my talk. And what was inspiring me. Okay, so I'm going to circle way back here. I sometimes form relationships with animals by offering them food. And there are certain animals with which it is less dangerous for both of us than it would be with others. So, for example, I am currently in the San Francisco Botanical Gardens. The coyotes here are reasonably well known to me. I see them commonly. I could easily form relationships with them by bringing them some meat. transaction between humans and wild things, especially city humans, will produce a lot of danger for both participants. Primarily because the human is dumb about what is important for the animals. Don't know if you heard that. That was a coyote. Let's see if yeah, it's yipping. All right, let's examine this problem here. Okay, this is a really good instance of synchronicity. It's crucial for all animals to avoid danger. And one of the ways they avoid danger is by avoiding calling attention to themselves. There are some situations under which it is relatively more safe to call attention to oneself, and others under which it's extremely dangerous. There's only one animal around here, that is a threat to the coyote, and that's Homo sapiens. If I were to begin feeding a coyote, and I could delude myself into thinking this is a good way to establish a relationship with them and to nourish that relationship literally, physically, okay, the reason that coyote is calling out at full volume in broad daylight, a very dangerous thing for it to do, is that there are sirens. So the humans make a machine that mimics a signal that essentially nearly forces the coyote to reveal its location. I mean, if you wanted to hunt coyotes, right, you could just bring a device with you that produced sirens, and they would light up their location with calls because they're physically, to some degree, right, they are physically unable to resist that stimuli, right? Hi. Now, if I were to begin feeding coyotes around here, what would naturally happen is that I would interfere with their natural tendency, one might call it, at least around here, to avoid contact with humans. Now, if I were not a city dweller, and I lived in the wilderness, and I wanted to have a relationship with the coyotes, there are a number of different ways I might go about forming that relationship. Perhaps the most important, but least blatant, is to imagine that the coyotes form an emissary to the humans, and I form an emissary from the humans. And in my imagination, and perhaps in my dreaming, me and the emissary meet, and we exchange protections and potencies and medicine and so forth. Humans are unlikely, moderns particularly, unlikely to pursue that kind of connection. Many of them would not believe that it's real. But that would be a good way. And then perhaps I could ask the coyote emissary questions, and it could ask me questions, and it might even have things to say to my people, things it wished to be communicated to my people about their people and our ancient union. Because some animals, synanthropes particularly, have had more than 1 million years of relationship with Homo sapiens. And you could say, well, our species really isn't that old, are you sure? Yes. Our species isn't that single age old, or it probably is. I don't know what the current model is of our estimated age of Homo sapiens. Probably measured in flat years though, which there never were. So our age is actually the time since the appearance of Homo sapiens in the records, so to speak, times the number of humans who have lived 1 year, right? And for each year, we'd have to add age. So our actual age and the age of our relationships with synanthropes is absurdly enormous. Bees, ants, wasps, mice, rats, porcupines, possums, skunks, moles, gophers, house cats, house dogs, coyotes, wolves, blue jays, magpies, sparrows, hawks, eagles, raptors, owls, crows and ravens, spiders. All of these are synanthropes. These are creatures that prosper and are used to the proximity of human symbionts, companions. Extended body is the concept here, not Darren has crow friends. Extended body. I am crow, I am blue jay, I am sparrow, I am spider. These organisms, as they interact with me, extend my intelligence. They extend my senses dramatically. I will learn things from observing them that are formally impossible for me to discover on my own, quote unquote. So in a sense, what I'm advocating here is the formulation not merely of a human relational hand-like situation, but a very complex hand-like situation involving many non-humans, including the non-synanthropes, presuming that there is any such thing. Because synanthropy is a matter of degree, not necessarily, binary polarization. Either is a synanthrope or isn't. Right? If you take the planet as a whole, and you realize that, like, your comparator is what we know of time-space, so if you take, sorry, I'm having an actual exchange with synanthropes right now, again, ironic, or synchronous, or both. If you take time-space as your comparator, okay, then the Earth is basically like a little droplet of water in a vast desert. And that droplet, there's nothing that isn't synanthropic there. Because essentially, from this perspective, from the perspective of time-space toward the earth rather than the earth out, the human out to nature, nature out to time-space, which is the perspective we are trained to take by our language and its categorical gambits. It's absurd and stupidifying categorical gambits. The whole package of lies that comes along with English courtroom mind, war mind, anthropocentricity, terracentricity, all of these things. So from time-space toward Earth, what you obviously have here, and if you're not capable of thinking this way, I will argue you're barely capable of thinking at all, is what you have here is a single organism that takes many forms. Now, it may turn out to be absolutely a physical fact that that's what you've got here. One imagines, for example, a spacefaring organism that I'll call starfish. It naturally swims between the stars in a protoform. That protoform could be incredibly profusely transcendent, not merely intelligent. And it may only be a cellular form and still be transcendent. There's no reason to believe bacteria are probably not representationally intelligent, but it's unlikely that we could get the forms of intelligence we're familiar with in human beings without them. And so which is superior, right? Is the origin superior or is the result superior? Well, once you decide that one of them has to be superior, you're already having courtroom mind. My point is just that it may well be that a single organism was primordial here and that everything that you see that lives on this planet is actually starfish's morphs, right? Morphs of starfish. One thing, one organism. It may also be that that there were multiple forms of starfish that came here, dwelt here. There might have been some competition, stuff that looks like war but isn't. But yeah, you got one organism here. So you should definitely be able to think that way, and you should probably think that way in precedence to thinking, oh, these are all separate, Darwinianly competitive morphs. That last thing can't be true. Primarily, it's the problem with the idea of competition. There's no such thing as competition without symbiosis. If you don't have cooperation, you don't get forms complex enough to compete. So the emphasis on competition is almost certainly a bad move. All right. If I feed the coyotes in the botanical gardens, it will reduce their suspicion and avoidance of humans in general. What that will mean, in very short order here, is that the coyotes I feed will eventually realize, humans are a source of food. Food is difficult and dangerous to get here. I'm going to occasionally approach humans. Some of those humans will have children. Some of them may have dogs. And coyotes will generally see small dogs. Smaller coyotes will see small dogs. Actually, all coyotes. Most coyotes will see small dogs as prey. That's a good meal that's fairly easy to obtain. So they may go after those small dogs. And that will result, almost certainly, in the humans killing them. Particularly here in the botanical gardens. Similarly, if I feed the blue jays peanuts, which they love, that signal resembles playing a siren in the territory of coyotes. An analogy would be dropping $100 bills along a busy freeway. Why a busy freeway? Well, for the blue jays, many of them live in the hunting territory of hawks. And so when I come with my peanuts, it doesn't shut off their vigilance, but it radically reduces it. It's funny, I've learned to recognize the shadow of the birds that I know, so that sometimes I can detect them behind me. So if I put peanuts out, and if I'm not careful about it and I'm not attentive, and I had to learn this by error, by making bad mistakes, costly mistakes, then I'm interfering with their vigilance. Whose responsibility is it? It's not a courtroom. This is a communal animal, me plus the birds, right? So I also love the hawks, and I have some relationship with them as well. But I don't want them to eat my blue jay friends. Obviously, I want them to get fed. Now, all of this is very complex. The problem is that I am not aware, ordinarily, of the environmental, relational, historical, biological necessities of blue jay life, or hawk life, or coyote life. And so if I wander into that, stumbling around like a magical thinking human, an indictment that I certainly deserve, but am now beginning to understand in a richer way, I like to think. I'm learning. I will cause harm where my goal is to have beneficial relations, mutually beneficial relations. And that will be emotionally painful for me, because my desires are not utilitarian. I am aware that the animal intelligences, including the insects, will, in a sense, make offerings of intelligence, dreaming, communal identity. They will benefit me, right? They will try to figure out what will benefit the one who is our friend. And many of those offerings will not be ordinary. It's not like they're going to bring me cash money, though in the case of a representational animal like, say, a particularly precocious raven, such a thing could take place. It could bring me objects. So if I want to actually honor the relationship, I have to some degree, protect the living beings from the rapacious and omnicidal stupidity of my species. And also my own ignorance. It will be difficult for me to form physical relationships with the coyotes in this garden without feeding them. If I feed them, it is very likely that will lead to them being shot by Parks and Rec, or whoever does animal control, whatever. Parks and Rec will call animal control, they'll come out and euthanize, quote unquote, basically meaning obliterate them. You know, and more stories of Darren's stupidity. So, one night I was sitting in my room, and out one of my windows I noticed a family of coyotes, a family of raccoons. Boy, here's a... if you want to talk about courage, motivation, intelligence, difficulty, heroism, one standout exemplar of this would be raccoon mothers in urban settings. There's no one to babysit their children. The children, like any children, are precocious, playful, curious, very difficult to orient. Meanwhile, this mother has to bring them through places with dogs and cars and broken bottles and poison and every kind of dogs, every kind of threat, cats, you can imagine, coyotes, every night. Right? Every night that mother is going to bring their children through a battlefield of things that will kill them, and her. So, one night I'm in my room, it's late, it's quiet, and I hear the chortling of the children. Naturally stupid as I am, and also, at that point prone to magical thinking, I emulate the sound back to them. What happens? The family of raccoons stops dead in the middle of the street trying to determine the source of that sound. Meanwhile, a car doing 40 miles an hour comes up the street, and somehow I think that even though they were in the car's path when it passed, I think they all managed to survive unscathed. I am not sure. One of them might have been struck by the undercarriage of the car. However, if that were true, there should have been a dead raccoon nearby in the morning, probably, baby. In any case, if you want to imagine me cringing to the core of my being for a moment, I thought I was being playful and human and intelligent and recognizing them and relating with them. What I did not realize is they are on a street. There is traffic in the street. This is why I made the metaphor of dropping $100 bills on the freeway. When I put out peanuts for the Blue Jays, I had best be complicit in their survival concerns, vigilance, protocols. I had best understand something deep about these, because if I don't, I am I am giving them an irresistible stimulus in a terrain where there are hawks. Not only that, there are most likely, nearly all of these would be males, by the way, in case you think gender doesn't matter. There are most likely people who would kill the blue jays for fun. So once they learned, for example, that you could bring a blue jay to your hand with a peanut, they would do so for nefarious purposes. The other day, I was in a part of the garden where there's a scrub jay that knows me. And by the way, that jay remembered me. I fed it one time, like 5 years ago, and that jay remembered me every time it saw me thereafter. The animals have, their memories are unencumbered by representation, so they have a lot of memory resource to enact. It's funny what a long road it's taking me to get back to my original motivational thought here that started this topic. So for some birds, the appearance of a peanut is so compelling that they become, like their nervous system actually divides against itself, and their ordinary instincts for self and companion protection at least briefly collapse into must get that peanut before something else does. And so this messes up their vigilance activities. Now, a brief divergence from protocol probably won't get you killed. At least not the first time. Oh, yeah, see, I was just feeding them and a hawk has come. One of the Coopers has come to see. Oh, it was turned away from me now. It's hunting. I respect that hawk and have felt its talons because, again, ignorance. Got in trouble with the hawks. So, there's some kinds of stimulus, and the humans have the same problem. This is why social media has become a terrifying manipulative disease. You can see that the goal is to capture attention, which has for some time been the new form of cash. And this is natural for an organism that's collapsing away from participatory relation, meaningful roles and relationships, into representations, money, porn, social media, shows, video games, etc. The coyote can't help. It's not powerless, but it's nearly powerless when the siren is near. It directly captures its nervous system, and this is what happens to us with our technologies. We undergo nervous system capture. Now, there's a blue jay in a part of the garden that remembers me from a long time ago. A couple of weeks ago, I gave it a peanut, and because it's a male and it knows me, it will come to my hand. Now, by the way, that's a particularly interesting situation. Let me explain why. If I put the peanut on the ground or on a branch, the jay must do, if it wants to live, it's going to check maybe between 8 and 30 vectors before it moves. And then when it lands, it will recheck those vectors. Ordinarily, the jay will have a companion up high that it can directly check with to see if there's something it can't see yet. And this complex participated relationship of mutual positive vigilance keeps both jays safe relatively well. Now, if instead I am aware that there's a male and the male knows me, I hold out a peanut in my hand. The male can be relatively certain that it can cross the interval between its perch and my palm safely, because it's a very short interval and it's fast. And grabbing the peanut from my outstretched hand, it doesn't have to do a bunch of vector checking, because a hawk is very unlikely to attempt to take a jay from a human palm unless the hawk has previously succeeded at such an endeavor. So in a way, the male's willingness to come to my hand is a bit more safe than coming to ground. What's she shooting? Oh, I see. Sparrows are eating seeds in a bush. Interesting that we call photography shooting. Leads to a whole other conversation wherein human vision is understood to be a complex series of rays that travel out from the eye, bouncing back from the things these rays touch. So in a sense, the male that comes to my hand is fairly safe, and as long as such interactions between me and the birds are infrequent, it's unlikely to produce their death unless there's something wrong with the peanuts. Or, conceivably, but awfully unlikely, they acquire some microbe from my skin surface or something. So I was feeding this male, and there were a couple of men approaching, and they saw the bird come to my hand. And they said, do you speak with birds? And I playfully said, doesn't everyone? And they laughed and made some comment like, well, I don't see the birds coming to the hands of people. Here's a male scrub jay that knows me. So now I will do the thing that I was just talking about, where the bird comes to hand. And he lands briefly on my hand when he grabs the peanut. Now, if there's a female around, I'll usually put a peanut out for her. So that she can also have the benefit of what a birder I know called bird heroin, which he meant peanuts. So yeah, the guys said this to me, and I said, well, peanut is a language understood by many birds. And they laughed. You know, the humans do some degree of monkey see, monkey do. So additionally, if I'm out in public and am witnessed relating with animals by giving them food, creates problems. Very unlikely that other humans are even similarly sensitive to the well-being of the creatures that I am, and I've made terrible mistakes, not on purpose. So yeah, it puts them in danger. Now, what I was thinking when I began this walk and talk was, there's some crows that know me. And when I'm near them, when I'm near their terrain, they group up and follow me. And people might see this. And I wonder what they would think if they noticed. I mean, I often wonder if people think actually at all. I wonder what they would think if they saw, 5 crows following me up or down some street in the city. And I thought that they might think I'm a witch. Humans naturally surveil each other, and they do so sometimes in obvious ways and sometimes surreptitiously. I was just being surveilled by a male in the garden. So yeah, I wonder what the humans might think. But the thing that I find interesting is that there's a very clear pecking order in the group of approximately 5 crows that know me well. And I give them peanuts sometimes. So they know that I am, I'm gonna bring them something good to eat. And it's winter, harder to get food, colder. Need more fuel. It's relatively easy to discern the genders in the corvids behaviorally. I have almost never seen, if ever, a female who's relatively adventurous and aggressive. Whereas the males will come right down and grab a peanut. And they won't merely grab a peanut, they'll check the other peanut. They'll do a weight test. They'll try to figure out which peanut is best. So they might pick up with their beaks 3 or 4 peanuts before the females even get near the food. And so that creates a problem where it's difficult to get a peanut to the females at all. The male crows have a craw so that they can store probably one peanut, if maybe 2 if we're talking raven. And so they can grab up, most of the peanuts. And the females are so timid in this particular group that although they may land near where the males are grabbing peanuts, and they may make some tentative passes toward peanuts. What you will notice with crows and ravens is they have a complex neurological behavior where they'll make a pass at something they intend to grab and then bounce. Right? Like leap backward, leap away. They'll make a pass towards something and leap away from it. And when they grab something, they'll leap away from it even though they've got it. And this seems to be what humans call an instinctual behavior. Most corvids share it, I imagine. I haven't seen all the different kinds of corvids. I've rarely been able to observe magpies. I think I've seen one in my life for a few minutes, in real life. Though I have sometimes observed them in video. By the way, there's a bunch of convocation of crows, and they seem stirred up. Yes, I am speaking of your people. Please do not poop right on my head. So interesting, the foreground background feature of vision, because in the foreground I see the crows and in the background there's these like visually challenging puffs of cloud that, what I mean by visually challenging is that if you look at one area of the cloud forms, the others could almost be in motion, the kind of motion that one sees in anything in the foveal vision under the influence of psychedelics, this kind of internal, efflorescing, outward, transformational non-motion that in vision, probably due to forms of neural feedback, still things appear to be moving, the whole context may appear to be breathing, and so forth. So the clouds are kind of redolent with this interior spirit or energy, although I am not under the influence of any drugs at the moment, unless you consider peanuts a drug. I did eat a couple. So it's hard to get peanuts to the crow girls, and I have a natural tropism for the underdog, for the little one, for the rejected one, for the outsider, so forth. So I remember one beautiful afternoon, fairly safe, this I think, where I walked to the ocean after not having seen it in many, many years. And I brought some peanuts with me, and it turned out that when I got there, I encountered an enclave of ravens. And so, first thing I think I did, I'm not really sure actually which thing came first. Let me speak with integrity about this, I'm not sure. I may have given them peanuts first, or I may have sang to them first. But both things were offerings of respect and honoring them, honoring their people and their spirit, honoring our communal relationship. And I remember that there was one raven It's funny how emotionally effective effective this is for me, affect. Because when I remember this, I'm starting to choke up. There was one raven There might have been a few ravens that I could visibly detect ticks around their eyes, but there was one raven who its eyes were surrounded with ticks. And if you've ever watched young crows and ravens, you will commonly see brother and sister pairs preening each other, and maybe brother and brother pairs, maybe sister and sister pairs. I don't know how common it is that a clutch produces one male and one female. But you will see them preening each other. Right? They will come very close together on a telephone wire or something, and they will preen each other, or one of them will preen the other, and they will request, you can see them request preening. And I knew, as I was looking at the raven with all of the ticks, that it was not treated well by the rest of the... They can be very mean in their social pods, corvids, well, the crows and the ravens at least. If the jays form extended communities, I've not seen them. I know that magpies seem to. But what I realized when looking at the raven was, first of all, obviously, this bird is not being preened. And it cannot remove the ticks, but any other creature could. Any of those jays, any of those ravens, could have preened it, and they would have received a tasty, nutritious insect meal by so doing. At least, in my thinking, confused as it may be.
Okay. John's idea was just let me know where you guys are.
So I worked extra hard to make sure that raven got some peanuts. And having fed them and sung to them, I walked up the shoreline. Where was I walking? North, I guess? Can't remember, probably. I walked up the shoreline and I acquired an entourage of ravens. So either, if someone were watching me, they would either think this is a magically potent person. Very few people would think that. Or they would wonder why. They wouldn't have a conjecture, they just wonder what the hell's going on here. Or they would intelligently infer that I had given them food. It's pretty hard to get a peanut to the girls in the little crow enclave. But what I noticed the other day that I thought was great was that it appeared to me that one of the males cached a peanut in his craw, And then, when the other crows weren't on the ground, exuded the peanut for the bird that I imagined to be his sister, well, could be his mate, to consume. And I thought that was really cool. You know, life is very challenging and difficult, and much more so in a world filled with machines. And perhaps somewhat naively, I believe I'm an extreme altruist, an exalt, in Andrea Kujevsky's nomenclature. I generally will travel in the direction of mutual benefit naturally, in any way that I can understand how to do so. My heart is more intelligent than my brain at this, much more intelligent, and so I get confused by my thoughts. Often. I make mistakes. There's an explanation for the complexity of the human brain that I prefer, which is that we might not be the alpha symbiont. And what I mean by that is something really weird. I don't mean the symbiont that dominates over all others or is the most important. I mean the symbiont that naturally becomes the summation lens of all of the other intelligences around it. All the forms of intelligence produced by starfish. Fungal, microbial, vegetal, animal, land creatures, water creatures, air creatures, living place beings, sky beings, all these intelligences. And, you know, I think the humans have this role. It's a bunch of very intense child signaling going on there. Pause for a moment here while a loud noise doesn't get recorded. It seems to me that I've said this before in a very real sense. The human species is the arbiter of the well-being or destruction of everything that isn't too small for us to see, and much of what is. So whether or not some creator God divinely mandated that we were the shepherds of life on earth, it turns out to be the case by fiat or by function anyway. Now, I think there are other similar alpha symbionts like us on Earth, and some of the microbial ones might be far more profound in the scope of their relationships than we tend to be. Clearly, in the waters, the whales and dolphins represent living summation lenses of the aquatic intelligences. How ironic that humans would slaughter them, thereby denying themselves access to those organs of intelligence, perception, and relation. For what? For the commodities their dead bodies produce? Those are worth pennies on the trillions of dollars of what is being disposed of, as usual, for humans trapped in representational cognition. But yes, our form has incredible, unique, monumentally profound faculties and abilities that are disposed of almost entirely by our representational behavior, cognition, our great forgetting, our amnesia, our actively self-generating amnesia. So I like to think that the complexity of the physical organ that we refer to as our brains, pretending it's distinct, again, pretending that it should be blatantly obvious that, again, one organism first. The singularity of the organism has precedence to any organ by many orders of magnitude, so that if you say the word brain, you're actually referring to the entire body and the extended environmental relationships and the entire history of life on Earth and the potential and future of life on this planet. Because there is no brain without a heart. You don't have a brain without kidneys. No skin, no brain. No mouth, no brain. There are certain organs you can do away with and still have a brain, but not most of them. And the humans are doing the same damn thing to the earth, right? They are ripping the organs of the earth out, selling them on the black market for cars and guns and bombs and shit and terror and torture and cages and awfulness. The species. Can't tell if this guy's yelling at himself or if he's yelling at his phone. So yeah, I mean, if the earth is a single animal, and the humans are an organ of that animal, they are an organ-destroying organ of that animal. Most of us have no desire to be anything resembling that. And ordinarily, we would have a fairly minimal and perhaps relatively net positive effect on the biosphere and the environment, particularly if our population were limited, but also if the object population that we produce were dramatically limited. This is interesting. Okay. Many people complain about the human population. Certainly it's a problem. But the actual problem seems to me not to be the number of human bodies, but rather what the masses of them tend to do. And one of those things is madly proliferate objects. And thus create, from living beings and places, effectively garbage and machines. So I think there's another explanation for the complexity of our brains, which is that the meta-organism that Earth is naturally produces in her organs complex meta-symbionts capable of astonishing feats of symbiotic sensing, relation, cognition, participation, so forth. And the more of those the Earth has, the more alive her own this creates webs of jewels in the net of her transcendence, yeah? Expanding it dramatically to whatever degree those metacognitives and metasymbionts remain true to the beautiful and noble and heroic missions of living beings on a delicate world in time-space. There's my foot, there's a little plastic elephant. Or maybe it's a pig. I wonder how many billions of those we've produced while the elephants and pigs were slaughtered. You know, at the species level, we are deadly poison to living worlds presently in our current. Whatever is orienting our groups is malignant, fundamentally malignant, and life-despising, intelligence-despising. Because any intelligence that tears itself to shreds must fail to qualify. And similarly, any intelligence that attacks its own foundations in relation and organism must fail to qualify. It's not clear at all. Individual humans can be relatively intelligent. Small groups of bonded humans can be preternaturally intelligent. But large disoriented cohorts of humans tend to be omnicidal in our time. And that's a game with a short future. So one thing that I want to encourage you to do, and I'm going to try and take my own advice here, is get together with a small group of other intelligent humans and come up with a mission that you all believe in and go on, have that adventure together in the living world. Very hard to emulate that sound. It's funny, there's ravens right above me. And one has to wonder if this is accidental. It's a pair. Now I can't tell what their signals mean. So I can't really tell if they're upset. Right? I can't really tell if they're upset at my behavior. I've been circling a tree. If they're curious, or something else. If we want to experience the potentials of our intelligence, our dreaming aspects, our transcendence as human beings, there are paths where this can be pursued in isolation. But if you want an accelerant, go with trusted others into adventure, meaningful relation, meaningful roles, nicknames, private lexicons. Explore the palm that unites the fingers, and you will never be disappointed. You might have misadventures, things may go wrong, but even from those you will learn very profoundly and quickly, and you will develop new senses, new abilities, new perspectives. So it turns out the guy that was yelling nearby is yelling into his phone. I wish you beautiful lives and ways, companions, adventures, love and play and creativity. And I look forward to learning together again very soon. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye for now.